This is a virtual reading of Conspirators, To Each His Own Agenda by Matt Gupta.
Chapter 26. The Capital. Felthor returned to the Marble City with news of the raid. It was well received that his men had saved the village and stopped the raid from spreading. Without the strength of the chieftain, the raiding parties were nothing to the nobles of the kingdom. But Felthor knew better. Now the raiders would simply rape and pillage without restraint, and their valuable warriors would have to be sent forth to take them on and defeat them. At least, when under the command of a chieftain, the raiders could be taken on and beaten in one fell swoop. He did not resent Turgon for letting the raiders escape, but it did cause more problems. Alistair was waiting for him inside his manor. "I don't remember giving you a key," Felthor said, upon seeing him lounging on a sunbench. "I am the Prince of Seaward." Alistair waved his hands mysteriously. "I don't need a key." "We have a problem," Felthor said, without needing further explanations. "What you call problems, I call opportunities." Alistair smiled. He clicked his fingers, and his servants left the room. "What troubles you?" "The Huns have begun raiding the northern border of Dacia," Felthor said, "just as a major part of the Legion has left Islesfield. Turgon will be hard-pressed to maintain stability in the region. There is no way the two are not linked." "Damn," Alistair cursed, but his eyes were still alive. "At least this will help rally the Woodland province to our cause. But we must deal with this later. The council is meeting tomorrow to decide on building up the royal fleet for action against Gladium. If we bring in this new threat, we may steal support for it." Felthor nodded and poured 2 goblets of rosewater. "Where do we stand?" "Aquila is to suggest the decree," Alistair grimaced. "We have no choice but to use him. Elsewise, it will be seen as just an attempt to claim it for ourselves. The man is treacherous, though. He will undoubtedly attempt to coup this for himself again. I should have placed a higher bid on the man." "He pushed us to give him the sun and moon," Felthor reminded him, handing the cup to Alistair. "He would not have advanced in our regime, so he'll make his own. He shares a goal to overthrow Ignatius, so we may trust him that far. So far, all he has done is give Ignatius the idea to outwit us, a crime which we allowed Richard to commit without any hardship. He may outwit us in one area, but all is going according to plan in other arenas." He sighed. "That being said, I did tell you to not trust in him too much." "Yes, you did." Alistair drained his cup. "You were right, and I will not cloud the issue." He let out a deep sigh. Nearly 3 months of campaigning and sucking political cock, all to come down on the shoulders of someone we don't trust. "We work with the toys our ancestors give us," Felthor grimaced. He sat down next to Alistair. "Though I take it you didn't invade my home to discuss politics, or have you?" "Yes and no," Alistair smirked. "Callisto is with child." It took a moment for Felthor to respond. "Is she?" he finally said. It was unclear whether or not this was good news to him. "I know you loved her," Alistair said, both sympathetically and with narrowed eyes. "But I need to know that you will not make things difficult for our cause." "I won't." Felthor found a seat and fell into it. "I am no fool. I made my peace on this subject long ago." "Good." Alistair stood up. "I will see you in the Citadel then." The Citadel was filled with people as it had been when Felthor had returned to the city. Everyone was here for the vote. The support was equally divided down the middle. On one side was the need for security to protect the maritime investments, and on the other was the question of the cost of the increased navy. Naval power was far more expensive than that of normal military, due to the fact that ships needed to be built and maintained from shipwrights, and the only main source of food and water on the sea was that provided by the state. Armies could forage and live off the land or raid grain stores in fruitful regions, but while ships could fish, supplies were always a problem. The nobility would be taxed the most to support the shipbuilding, as many owned most of the shipwrights. But the depression was being hard felt, and assets needed to be protected. Felthor took his place in the side rows, nearest to Alistair as a normal seating would allow. Their supporters were doing all they could to sit on their side of the citadel. Ignatius's supporters sat on his side, with Camirvan's moderates in the middle. The old man stood up when the hall came to order. The citadel will hear the voice of Aquila. Aquila stood up, next to Ignatius. "My lords," he said to the hall, "I invite you all to consider the vote of the increase in the Royal Navy, to begin an offensive against the Pirates of Gladium, in order to put an end to the pillage and destruction left in their wake." Ignatius was scowling at him in the way he seemed to always do, but, due to the efforts of a bribed manservant, his goblet was being kept filled and strong. He was spearheading the opposition to the creation of the fleet. Decimus was beginning to show how much he was being swayed by his teenage bride, and was on the side of creating the fleet, but to protect her home of Seaward and not the rest of the kingdom. The lead of the campaign was Aquila. He specifically wanted to strike against Gladium and had prepared an attack plan, which he was keeping very much to himself. This only deepened the distrust of Alistair and Felthor. It was clear that his intentions were to lead the attack himself and to reap the rewards of the victory. Felthor and Alistair wanted the fleet to be created at Ignatius's expense to protect the coast and allow them to raise their forces for what would come next. The debate was brief but decisive. Many of the nobility were worried about the cost of the fleet, and Ignatius played upon that. The chief of this concern was Camirvan. His family owned much of the lumber in the kingdom's southernmost provinces, and if they simply donated it to the cause of building the fleet, they would lose out on a major part of their supplies. As a result, they would only support the vote if the kingdom would buy the supplies from them. Ignatius was the state treasurer, and he refused entirely. There would be no negotiation on that. Aquila was losing support on this, and the decree was failing. Falthor stood up when the old man asked for people to speak. He addressed Camirvan directly. "I will not ask you to sacrifice what puts you in this chamber, but we must all make some sacrifice. If my house pays a percentage of your much-needed lumber, will anyone else make up the difference?" He raised his arms in invitation and looked around the room. "I," Decimus stood up, "I, of the House of Stewards, will pay a percentage." Another noble stood up. He owned the coastal crossing which traded with the southern colonies and owned a huge tax revenue. He didn't say anything, but simply saluted and bowed his head. "Is this satisfactory for you?" Felthor said to Camirvan. "What wealth does Decimus command?" Camirvan demanded. "If the true leader of the House of Stewards refuses to fund this project, then where will the money come from?" "The kingdom's law must be upheld," Alistair answered, before anyone else did. "If this chamber votes for the creation of the fleet, then even the steward must agree to pay. Am I wrong?" "It is so," the old man coughed. He simply nodded to finish his point. "Secure your own vote on this and you will get your money," Alistair said. Ignatius threw his goblet away and stood up, swaying. "I will not be dictated to, like a child king. We will adjourn until the morrow. Felthor sighed in sorrow. Another day gone. We must speak with Decimus and Aquila. They did so. Aquila, Decimus, and Callisto came to Felthor's manor. Callisto had little in terms of appetite, and moving seemed to be turning her stomach. It was clear that this would not be a pleasant pregnancy. Decimus sat next to her, attempting to keep physical contact with her at all times. Aquila was fidgeting with himself, unsure about what he should be doing. To business then, Alistair said, after they had greeted each other and offered food around the room. He turned to Felthor. What in the name of my father's cock were you thinking? It was either that, or we lose the entire vote, Felthor protested. Camervan is a slippery ally to have. I have told you he works to enhance himself. He is an industrialist and will monopolize the entire project for his own riches. We agreed that we would not give coin to this project. Alistair scowled. We need all the money we can get for our armies to take the throne and secure the realm. There will be no plans to take the kingdom if we are plagued by pirates and our supply lines are under constant attack. He's right, Aquila said. We have to deal with this before any coups can be made. This is our only path, Decimus agreed. But Camervan makes a valid point, Alistair said. What power do you have that I or your father won't give you? I hold a major vote in the citadel, Decimus said. I am also the heir to the capital. My father is still in his prime, but even he will not last forever. His money is my money in a sense, so I will be able to borrow against it. Alistair was impressed by his creation. A political genius though he was, even he didn't see the full value in this power that Decimus had without him. I cannot put any coin towards this. I have my own fleet to fund. We will not ask you to do so, Felthor smiled. What of you, Aquila? Could you place any funds towards the project? I am not a rich man, Aquila shook his head. I am nobility in name only. I maintain no actual power to bring. Then we must organize how much we must give to this project, Alistair said. If I foot the majority of the funds, Decimus offered, then we can be sure our own forces will take less of the brunt. It could very quickly turn on you, Callisto grunted. Your father may state that it is your debt and not his. She was right. Then I will make any contract between Camervan and the house, not myself. A contract that will be linked to my house as well, Alistair said, shaking his head. A contract that will be voided when House Seaward becomes the royal family, Felthor suggested. There was no more to be said. We will need to keep Ignatius from making a move on us, Felthor mused. Might it suggest something? Intoxicating. The citadel reconvened early that morning. The old man called forth his first speaker. Once again, Aquila had to suggest the vote. One of the things that Alistair was most worried about. He had conferred with Cameron over placing his guardsmen around Aquila at all times. This was to ensure that he could reach his seat to make the suggestion. If he hadn't, no one else could suggest the vote. Fortunately, there was no trouble. Ignatius seemed to have had the foresight not to martyr the project by obviously attacking Aquila, or it might have been a sense of friendship. It was unclear. But for Felthor, the reasoning didn't matter. The vote was suggested and Decimus stood up. My lords, after much deliberation, the House of Stewards has declared that they will front a full 40% of the funds to pay for the materials from Camervan's family. The citadel broke out into applause. Ignatius flew to his feet, bursting with an energy and rage never before seen in him. Who are you to speak for my house? You will not be heir to my kingdom. He launched himself at Decimus. The citadel guards, who stood behind the top chairs, moved to separate them and wrestled the heavy Ignatius away. The citadel burst into mixed cries of distress and encouragement. It took a full 20 minutes for the citadel guards to declare order in the citadel, after Ignatius's supporters went into a full brawl with the moderates and the other parties. Cameron had to bring in reinforcements to hold back the battling powers and escorted Ignatius, as the source of the unrest, away. The old man had taken a blow to his head, and a huge gash was being tended to. It was tradition for the council to adjourn, but Alistair raised himself up to take advantage of Ignatius's absence. "Calm, my friends," he urged them. "Calm. We are not bandits or orcs fighting each other in pits. We are the kingdom. Let us convene this vote, and let this lengthy problem be put to bed." There was a murmur of agreement. The House of Stewards has declared it will give 40% of the cost to the project. What will the House of Islesfield put forward? 20, Felthor said. 20 also, the other noble said, before anyone asked him. My house will give 20. Could your house put forward the remaining sum? Alistair asked Camervan. Camervan sighed and nodded. If these men stay true to their word, then you will have my vote. With the combined support of Felthor, Alistair and the moderates, the vote was cast with surprising force. Alistair called the citadel to adjourn until the next day. The old man had been declared bedridden, so a new man was put in place to be the announcer of the citadel. He was hardly the speaker of his predecessor, but he managed. Ignatius had been allowed to return, but the drug they had used to send him into a frenzy had reacted with him badly, and it had left him with unsightly rashes on his face. The vote was cast. The fleet was now to be created. The question was, how many ships? How long would it take? And what was the purpose of it? The consensus on the matter was that 80 ships be created, but Ignatius and his supporters convinced the citadel to lower the number to 50. The type of ship was then discussed. Many of the nobles wanted the fleet to be heavy ships that were large and could fight many enemy vessels at a time. Alistair could see the sense in this, but being the ruler of a naval kingdom, he knew the value of speed. The war galleys of the Roman navy were enormous, based on the huge 5-tiered rowing and wind-powered ships that had dominated the oceans in the past. The ships of the present day were smaller, based on 3 or 4 levels, but no less deadly. They operated on a design that had a wooden tower on top, where archers and ballista troops could rain death down on the enemy. A crew complement on a ship like this could easily be in the hundreds, with warriors to board enemy ships on top of that. The main weapon of any war galley was in its ram, which was at the front of the ship. Using both wind and manpower in the oars, the ship would be propelled forward and smash into the enemy ship. If the ship wasn't instantly destroyed, the marine troops could then deploy a boarding plank from their ship onto the enemy and do battle with the crew. The rams varied in shape and size. Many of them had been a deep curved blade that went under the surface of the water to allow the ram to tear apart a ship's hull and cause it to take on water. These rams, however, were made of pure steel, which weighed the ship down and cost it speed, an essential factor when ramming. Some of the lighter vessels were made with an actual ram, used to break down a gate during a siege. When the men of Gladium declared themselves as a true pirate threat, the Seaward Admiralty redesigned the ram to have a hook shape at the end, designed to tear pieces of the enemy hulls away when either ship moved. The ships were finally decided on. 20 war galleys with ballista and skirmishers, 7 galleys with archers, 20 galleys with cohorts of marines, and 3 smaller support ships designed for speed and maneuverability. Now came the part that Felthor dreaded. the purpose of the fleet. If the fleet was made for offense, then Aquila would want the command, and he was proving too unpredictable for Felthor's liking. He could easily turn his ships around and use the fleet to attack them at Ignatius's command. Seaward's land was most vulnerable to naval incursions, and the fleet that was currently in anchor in the harbour would not be able to do anything against a fleet of war such as this. As he feared, Aquila stood up and requested that the citadel give him the command of the fleet to engage in battle with the pirates. This was considered, but Alistair led the opposition. "If anyone is to lead a fleet, it must be Admiral Mistnir," he declared. "We have all heard of his skill at naval tactics. When he smashed the Gladium fleet against the coast many a year ago, he was outnumbered nearly 4-1, and he emerged victorious. Only by destroying his entire fleet in the process," Ignatius laughed. It was a true point. The battle in question had been against a fleet of 30 ships in a natural harbour, where the heel of the Italian boot-like land lay. The pirates had been raiding the coast and had taken shelter among the cliff edges to enjoy their treasures and humiliate their prisoners. Mistnir had descended on them in an attempt to pin the pirates against the cliff face. His ships were of brilliant Greek design and manned by the equally brilliant Greek marines and slingers. He had bottled them in, coming at them from all sides. He completely surrounded them and charged in without hesitation. The first attack was devastating, but the pirates countered. They had significantly more ships, and every one of the brilliant Athenian ships, bar his own, was lost. Though he managed to save the majority of his men who were floating in the water, the ships could not be salvaged. It was his first command, and he expected it to be his last. Despite the loss of ships, however, it was a major victory, and Mistnir was given the grandest honour. He was promoted to Castellan of the Seaward Fleet, not that there was one anymore. Unlike the Roman Admiralty, he could hold the office until his death, which he regarded as an imminent event. All these points were unnecessarily covered, as the story was something of a marvel in the kingdom. Ignatius grew tired of the narration and simply declared, "I will not allow Seaward to have control of the entire military force." Then he relaxed somewhat. "If any man is to have command, it will be the one who ordered it." It was a surprising turn, but the looks and nods between himself and Aquila suggested that this was a long plan. He will represent the values of the capital and control the naval power of the kingdom. He turned to Aquila. "You may have broken the realm to do this." He stood up and glowered down at him, his momentary break from character gone. "But you are true to the security of the realm. You will serve with honour." "I will," Aquila said, as if he was being knighted. "Aquila will have command," Ignatius declared. He turned to the citadel. "I propose to elevate him to the rank of Captain General, the first man to be a third consul in over 600 years. Alistair sighed and nodded resolutely to Felthor. With some hesitation, they voted to give Aquila his rank. It wasn't what they wanted, but the citadel was unanimous on the subject, so showing any opposition to it would have been a waste of time, to say the least. Felthor was composing a plan in his mind. Aquila was green as summer grass in comparison to Mistnir, or himself in command. He could earn his trust and allegiance in exchange for schooling. It would be a long time before the fleet was ready, so they would have plenty of time to organize it. He could take him to Islesfield and teach him. It would keep him away from Ignatius, and they could indoctrinate him to their cause again.